good art has an it that is really difficult to describe, but you know it when you see it. And the more you look at art and the more you get into it, the more you talk to artists, the clearer this it becomes.
My name is Sergio Gomez. I'm an artist, curator, gallery owner, author, and co-founder of the Art Next Level program. And my goal with this channel is to make marketing and art business easy so that you can grow your art career, find new opportunities, sell more art, and spend more time creating in the studio. So if you like that, make sure you click on the subscribe button and click on the little bell so that you receive notifications of our future videos. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm super happy to be here because today I have a special guest, Pato Paez. Pato, good to see you. How are you?
Hey, Sergio, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like I see you almost every day, in social media. And, it's nice to have you here. Now we can actually interact, have a conversation. It's the second time that we do also an episode here for the podcast too. And you've been also so kind to share sometimes some of our content. And so it's excited to collaborate with people like you. You are an art advisor. You're based in New York. You work with artists. You work with collectors and organizations and, all that jazz. So you are well embedded in the art world and the art community. And what I love about you and what you do is that you love artists, right? You're not just for the business, but also for the love of artists. Last time that we spoke, you talked about how you started and, your early collections and, your love for art. So we invite our friends, if you missed that one, go check that out. Because today we're going to approach some new conversations specifically on the art market, on how you look at art, etc. So, but first of all, how you doing, Pato? How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Look, I really appreciate being here. I really admire the work that you do. You just mentioned social media. I do feel like I see you very often. It's, your posts pop up on my feed. And yeah,
Likewise.
I really enjoy it. Yeah, I think, you were talking about my love for art. Yes, I love art. I love artists. I like connecting with artists. I think if there's no connection to the artist, sort of the art falls flat. I think, I always say when you buy art, you are buying an object, of course. You're buying a work of art, but in reality, what you're buying is a tangible representation of a story. Is a story. It's a story of the art. It's a story of the artist, and it's a story you told yourself about the art and the artist. So every time you look at that work, that story comes to mind, and that's how we establish a connection with art. And it's so important for artists to understand that if there isn't an emotion that is conveyed through their art, there is no connection to the viewer, the buyer, the collector. I think, and I think I can remember if we spoke about this the time before when we met, but what we know, and just to give you a little bit of background, my background is in medicine, and I've studied neuroaesthetics, which is trying to map in the brain where the aesthetic experience is felt, and there's a huge amount of data that gives us insight on how people appreciate visuals, I mean, how people appreciate art. So and it's one of the things that the way I see it. A work of art has, sort of two pieces, right? There is an initial piece called, the aesthetic experience, the aesthetic appeal, what I call it, and it's sort of like the hook. Imagine when you go to a museum, you stand in the center of a gallery, and there's going to be that one piece that catches your attention, and that's the piece that you go to, right? So that's the aesthetic appeal, and it has to do with form. It's got to do with color. It has to do with composition, and that's sort of like that's what you respond to initially.
Right.
So a work of art has to have aesthetic appeal. You go to it, you start looking at it, you start, and you start learning about it. You start, describing what you're seeing. You learn about the artist. You learn about the context in which the art was created. Why, when, and even the physical context within, the art is displayed. And all this is what creates that story. All this is what creates that, second layer to art appreciation, which is the bonding of it.
Yeah, the glue,
You know,
right?
so yeah, I think, I think that's real art. It has those two pieces. It's got the aesthetic appeal and it's got the story. And the story perhaps is more important because the
Hmm.
story will, will connect you to
Yeah.
the art and it'll connect you to the artist. And I feel that if there isn't a story
Hmm.
and if just, it's a pretty object, then it becomes a decorative object, which is,
That's
it's not a bad thing.
right, right.
It's just, it's,
Yeah, I love that. I love how you really easily we can visualize both aspects, right, of the art experience. How important do you think it is for an artist today, right, in 2025, to be part of telling that story? You probably heard that, like, oh, I just want the art to speak by itself. I just want to be in the studio and
for
never
sure.
seen, right?
For sure. I mean, even artists who say the art speaks for itself,
Right, that's the
um,
old saying.
yeah, it doesn't. Even that art has a story. It's
Hmm.
just it needs to be found. I think the artist might not be in touch with what that story is, but real artists when they're creating, and you're an artist, you understand this. There's a feeling that you have that you absolutely have to put out. You absolutely have to put on a piece of substrate, right? A piece of
Right.
substrate. That feeling, that is the connection. Now
Mm.
whether you're aware or not of what that feeling is, that feeling exists.
Right.
You know, if you're just doing it for the likes, if you're just doing it for the vibe, if you just, again, it's a decorative object, which, is not bad. My house is full of decorative objects that don't have a story, and my house is full of art that have, very special stories, and I think, I'm the kind of person who will value, you know, a Warhol next to an emerging artist who I met, 2 weeks ago on Instagram. Those are two different kinds of stories, but to me, they're equally valuable in terms
Yeah.
of my connection to it.
Right. Right.
Beyond the monetary
Mhm.
value that these works may have.
Yeah. So let's get back to some of our artists who are watching this or listening to it as a podcast. Like they understand the connection and the value of story, but they're like, Pato, I'm an introvert. How do I tell my story? Or I'm not good with words. How do I tell my story? How do you help an artist who has a hard time? They know they have the story. They may even know their story, but they just have a hard time getting it out into the world.
Yeah, I think both. So it's kind of like a dance, right? I think part of it is the responsibility of the person who's looking at the art,
Hmm.
and I love asking questions. In fact, I posted yesterday something on Instagram about, I ask a
Yes, I
million
saw that.
questions, things that are not even about the art because I want to know who this person is. So I think, you know it's a shared responsibility, between the collector and the artist. The stakes are higher for the artist because it'll depend
Yeah.
whether they can sell the work or not. But like also the stakes are high for the buyer because if they may walk away on a work of art that's phenomenal. So I think finding the story within the art, if the artist is an introvert, it may take a little longer, but the story is always there
Hmm.
because I would say more often than not, when an artist creates something, it's just the feeling that they're translating into their craft, into their art. If it's visual, if it's performance, performance art is a really easy one to take as an example because performance art is pure feeling.
Right.
It's pure feeling. So I love seeing on social media when an artist is creating the art because you see it's like it's sort of like layered, right? It's
Right.
performance art as they create the work, and that's the feeling that I'm talking about. What is that thing like when I and sometimes he doesn't have words to describe it. I mean, we don't have the words, but we know when it's there.
Right.
you
Right.
know Good art, and I can't remember who I'm quoting. Good art has an it that is really difficult to describe, but you know it when you see it. And the more you look at art and the more you get into it, the more you talk to artists, the clearer this it becomes. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it, and I also believe that good art is always good art. In that sense, for the artist too. And it remind me of how sometimes the story is there, but I love how you talk about through social media we have the opportunity kind of like to show the development of that story, right? Like the behind the scenes of how the work was made as you see the artist making it, or the different layers or the process from A to C. How the work was made. Something that I like to do sometimes on my blog page on my website is I do uh, behind the scenes, which is just a photo montage of how the work was made. So when a collector goes there, oh, they can see this is the process, even if I'm not there saying it, but they can actually see the pictures to speak about the story that's being created and built, all the different layers that are part of that work that at the end makes it to what it is. And I had that idea because I remember when we used to have CDs, right, for or DVDs for our movies. Just
Yes.
usually had like a little featurette that said, like the making of, Mission
Making up.
Impossible,
Yes.
right? I've always watched that. Unfortunately, we don't have that now with Netflix and all that
Yeah. I
stuff. But
mean, like,
I miss that stuff. I used to love that, and I think we have an opportunity as artists to do the same.
yeah, no, I think, like, for example, and this is a very specific example. I'm going to give an example of your
Yeah,
account that I've seen you do more than once, where your work is rolled up and the
yeah,
the,
yes.
the top is pinned, and then you unroll it in front of the camera. That's just beautiful because it lets you in on the feeling of you doing this. It's like,
Right.
this is what I created, and here's how I present it to you.
Right, and for
You
me it's
know,
important, like the softness of the material.
yeah.
That's why it's like that. The fragility of life, the cycles of life, so my work's about. So it's soft, right? I unroll it, and so you feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to understand it aesthetically, and it's beautiful to understand the story.
Yeah.
I think, another example is, and perhaps some of the people listening, I know artist Weston Lambert, who creates these sculptures that are, many of them are stone and glass. And it's like a really beautiful object, but and not only that, the work is about the tension between the two materials.
Mhm.
The work is about dualities, and once you understand that the work is about dualities, Weston can do anything, and you will see the duality in it.
Because
You
life is
know?
about dualities, right?
Right?
Day,
Exactly.
night.
Exactly.
Everything
Yeah.
is dualities. Yeah.
Once you understand the it of the work, once you understand the motivation of the artist, then it becomes so clear, and then you see it through.
Right.
You know.
and and,
Uh, I,
and probably you find that then collectors have an easier connection to, or an easier step to walk into the work, you know by being able to contextualize that idea, right?
for sure, if I understand the art, I'm more likely to buy it if I can afford it. You know.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about the connection.
Love
Uh,
that.
yeah.
Now, something that you also talk about, because you've been involved in the art world for a long time, you have seen a change also over the years, as we all have, you know uh, and how galleries have transitioned, and how the art market has transitioned, how the role of the artist also has transitioned. Where I remember when I was in art school, kind of we all dream like to be discovered, and all you do is just get
Yeah.
discovered in the gallery. But that's an old world, right? That doesn't exist anymore as
Yeah.
much, and now it's a different thing. But I find it to be actually a fascinating time to be living as an artist now, because I have the opportunity to you know we have these tools that allows us to connect. I think a lot of artists think of it as marketing. It sounds like a dirty word because they think I'm trying
Yeah.
to sell something, but I love how you do it, because it's about sharing our story. It's about sharing who we are. You do it so graciously and so wonderfully in your Instagram and TikTok, because
Thank you.
you are honest, and sometimes like you are in the park, or you are in the grass, and like you're sharing a thought, right, or an idea, and that's honest, and that is it seems feels so kind of like true.
Yeah.
And we have this tool that we can all use as artists. We also have it, right? So marketing doesn't have to be this like sell. Is sharing that story, sharing who you are. Tell me a little bit about how did you started with social media, how did you get into it, and how you have embraced it and approached it as part of kind of what you do.
Oh, I was an early adopter of Instagram. I love, photographs, and I loved,
Yeah.
back then. Remember, it was just photographs, and
Right. Put a
I
filter.
loved, yeah, and I met so many artists doing this. I think, in the last, you know, 20 years, the opportunities that social media have has opened for artists. You were just talking about back then in art school 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The goal of every artist was to be discovered by a gallery, and then you were on easy street because the gallery was going to do all the work, which was great if you were discovered, if you got a good gallery. If not, it was sucked,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But now, perhaps it's more difficult to be discovered by a gallery, or maybe not. I don't know. But what's clear is that the field is open and people can show their work, and people can, again, there are artists who have built an incredible career without a gallery at first. And once they built that, sort of, when the ball is rolling, the galleries would come. And again, I think the notion that the gallery will do everything for an artist, it's very outdated. I think even if you have a gallery or two or three, you still have to do most of the legwork. You got to create the work, and you have to promote the work. That is on the artist. you know
Yeah,
but
it's the way I see it is a partnership. Like for us, like our top selling artists are artists who are good at social media too, who are good in their about showing up and sharing their stories and things like that. So it creates a wonderful partnership where like we don't expect them to do all the work, they don't expect us to do all the work. We work together like a dance, as you mentioned
it's
earlier, right?
symbiotic. It's
Yeah,
absolutely
exactly.
symbiotic.
Yeah,
Like,
they
yeah,
share work with
it's
us a video, we share it, vice versa, we post a video of them, then they share it. So it all kind of becomes part of this fabric that is online, where like because collectors a lot of times they don't have the boundaries anymore that they used to be. If they wanted to see art, they had to go to the gallery. Now they have access to us, they have access to the gallery, they have access to the interior designers, have access to everyone. So access is now available. It's kind of what we're gonna do with it. And
yeah.
you know yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, it's symbiotic, right?
Hmm.
It's ridiculous to expect the gallery will do all the work for an artist. We're not there anymore, and I think that is a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
You know, you're an artist, and you're in business. It is a business, and like any business, a huge percentage of your time goes to trying to promote that business, to get more
Right.
business, and I think social media helps with that. Presenting your work helps with that. Collaborating with other artists, like, the more people know about you and your work, the more likely you are to sell it.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know I think, and what I get a lot is, I get emails sometimes from artists who are not, near the big
Hmm.
metropolis of in the U.S. or anywhere, where the art scene is. Online, there is a possibility to create a community of artists, to join a community of artists who are not near big cities, and as small as a city might be, there's always more than one artist everywhere.
Yeah.
It's such a it's such a it's expression. Like, we need
Right.
to express. So there are creative people, you know, um, everywhere,
Absolutely.
everywhere.
And I think right now we have there's an interesting kind of situation where we happen to be at right now. I think both for Instagram and TikTok and some of the other platforms where virality can all of a sudden happen to anyone because now the algorithms are smarter and they are showing more of content that you necessarily don't follow, but it just shows up in your feed. So sometimes you could be making like effortless, you know, 15-second, 10-second little video in your studio because what the heck, I'm gonna post it, and that could go like get a million views. All of a sudden, you just don't know. It's
Yeah,
just
you never know. And also,
this thing.
like people complaining that the algorithm shadow ban, like, I don't know what any of this shit means, but what I know is that it's a free tool. Use
Right,
it.
right.
Don't complain about it. Just use it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's free, right? Well,
Yeah,
and even like when say, well, we didn't have to worry about that in the old days, but in the old days we had to worry about, for example, spending a lot of time with our 35 millimeter camera, taking pictures that you had no idea how they were going to come out.
sure.
Wait like 2 weeks for the slides to come back, pick the
Yeah.
good ones, take a little tiny pencil, and that was time consuming.
Do you remember artists had like physical portfolios with
Yeah,
like slides that sometimes you would send the slides to a gallery
exactly.
for
That's
them
exactly what
to
I'm thinking.
look at them, and then you didn't, like, another gallery wanted the slides, you had to wait for that gallery to send them back to you so you can send it. Yeah, it was like, yeah,
It
things have
was,
changed. I think they're easier. There's more competition for
yeah,
sure,
right.
but there are also more opportunities. And I think also the buyer behavior has changed. You want to buy
Right.
art. Many art buyers, or people who want to buy, people who are interested in art, think about this. The art world for the longest time has been very exclusive. It's not an inviting world.
Right.
If you think about the white cube galleries, like, they're designed to exclude people.
Of course. Yeah.
They're designed to be intimidating. So now with the access the social media uh, has given people, you can look at art on your phone, and you can start following artists, and it's not as intimidating as it is going to a gallery. And
That's
what
right.
I will say is that once you kind of get over feeling intimidated, walk into a gallery and look at art and start asking questions about the art, that becomes easy. But I think that first step is really difficult for a lot of people. So I think, in a way, social media has made that so much easier, and it's made it easier for artists to sell their work through social media than without having to involve a gallery.
Right.
A gallery, I think, is important for an artist because it brings prestige to the work, and it's also important because the gallery will teach the artists many things. For example, how to price their work. So I'm not saying that an artist should only focus on building their career on social media. If you can do that and you're happy with that, that's great. There is, the gallery still plays a very important role in an artist's career. It's just not the only role that the
Right.
gallery plays. So it's not the only role that the artist needs in their career.
Right.
You
And
know,
yeah, and you and I, we both believe that an artist has control, right? Artists should have control of their careers
sure,
and
of
make
course,
a choice. I always say to an artist, you pick the type of artist you want to be, the career that you want, and stop criticizing the others. Pick your own
yeah.
path and
Yeah,
stick with
pick
it.
your own path. And I think sometimes what happens, the artists become discouraged because the work that they're producing is not, um, probably is not appealing yet, but that is just part of the process.
Right.
You just have to, like, keep going. That means you're not mature enough, not that you're not good enough.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like any skills, art is something that you learn.
Right.
I will say, skills you can learn. The feeling and the openness to pour that feeling into a canvas, that cannot be learned. That can be
Right.
practiced, but it can be learned. That's what we think of as talent. I
Right.
think, and I always say, I would much rather work with an artist who have shitty skills as an artist, but a great story, than an artist who has incredible skills, but the art is kind of flat.
Mm. Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it all comes with working in the studio. to find that voice that perhaps I think sometimes, and I don't know what you think about this, but I think sometimes because of social media, I think artists, particularly emerging artists, feel the pressure of, oh, I gotta know my thing, my style, like really quick and really fast, and they're
Yeah,
trying to cut corners in order to do that. And I was like, no, the style will find you. That's what I believe. Will find you
yeah,
when you spend the time in the studio. There was a study that I was reading about this week, that what creates mastery. Like they study like scientifically, like top performance in sports, in business, and different things. And they found like around 10,000 hours was like the level
yeah,
of mastery. And so,
yeah, yeah.
sometimes you want to find our style like with three paintings.
Yeah, no, I think it's impossible. You've been in business for how many years? You're like, it takes a long
Takes
time
time.
for an artist to kind of like get to the core of what their work is.
Yeah,
But I trust that every artist can get there if you
absolutely.
put in the hours, if you put in the
Right.
work,
Yeah.
if you think about what you're doing. I think that could be one of the, sort of the damaging things that social media has done is the immediacy of everything. Uh, Becoming an artist is a process, and I don't think it's a process that ever ends. I don't know. You tell me as an artist.
No.
You're constantly evolving, right? You're
Right.
constantly developing your 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 work.
Right.
It never ends. It ends when you decide to like drop the
Yeah. Yeah.
brushes. I don't know.
Yeah. Or when you start pushing yourself, when you find yourself in a very comfortable position, then you kind of lose that drive. And I think as artists, we go ups and downs like everybody else.
Oh God, yeah.
There are some seasons in which, like, man, your work is like hot and it's like amazing, and people want it. And then you get into another season, like you don't even understand, you don't work on
Yeah.
it, but you make more work to get out of that season
Right, no,
to be
for,
able.
for sure. It's not, you're not going back. This is
Yeah.
part of the process. And I think, again, I think artists need to be constantly producing work because, from what I've seen artists do, you produce work and the majority of the work that you produce is mediocre.
Right.
And in between those mediocre pieces, there is this phenomenal work.
Right.
That's you have to produce work constantly
Hmm.
in order to create that great thing. It's immature to think that you'll sit in front of a canvas and you'll create something beautiful. I think the goal is to create something. Let go of the, whether it's beautiful, whether it's worth it, whether it's a great piece, whether it's, that that is that doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling that you're pouring into it
Yeah.
and the feeling that you're creating. That's what's important.
Yeah, and that's
You
why
know?
I love those studio visits when, as a gallery and as a curator, and I'm sure you do too. And probably one of the best experiences in an artist studio is finding those pieces that had never been seen outside of the
Yeah,
studio. Like, like, oh, that's a crappy piece in between it. Sometimes, like, oh, those are like the sweet
for
spots that
sure.
that got him into do this big one, like everybody knows about.
I was talking to an artist. He is a Dutch artist. This
Hmm.
is a while back, and he described the studio as a research lab.
Yeah.
And at that point, my entire framework of how to do a studio visit changed because it's a place where the artist experiments.
Right.
And again, there's going to be piles and piles of things that never make it out because that's part of the experimentation. It's part of the process. It's part of the creating something great. You do have to do that work
Hmm.
that will never see the light of day.
Yeah, and I love it. And that's like when I go to an art studio, an artist showing me this piece, but my eyes are like trying to find what's at the
Yeah,
corner,
yeah.
what's under the couch, and
No,
that's
I know.
so fun.
For
Uh,
sure. And I think, and I think, artists should be open to like, sometimes I do this kind of thing and I find a great
Golden.
piece of work. And I'm like, how come you've never developed this as a collection, And then that opens up, new ideas in the artist. Yeah,
Exactly.
I think um, artists are pretty crappy editors of their own work.
Yeah. And that's
I
the value
think,
of a good critique or a good studio visit, inviting people and having peers come over and look at the work. Like, what, that's what art school, I think the biggest value of art school is not that it teaches to make art, it teaches you to listen and to observe and to get feedback from others, because you spend
For
all day
sure.
listening from your peers and then your
For
professors,
sure.
and then we get out of school and we leave that, that's, where we need that like voice and feedback from others.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly um, you know, arrogant to think that you know better. Everybody needs feedback. And I think, one of the things when artists reach out to me and they say, can you give me feedback about my work? I always ask what kind of feedback you want,
Yeah.
because it's important to know what kind of feedback they want. Like, do you think my work, do you think I could start reaching out to galleries? That's one kind of feedback. Do you think my story is cohesive? That's another kind of feedback. And it's important to, as an artist, when you're asking for feedback, ask, what kind of feedback you want. Because then you'll get nothing. You're like asking for feedback. That's very general.
Right. Exactly.
What am I going to say? Is it
And if
you
when
know
asking for feedback, what you're looking for is somebody just to say how awesome you are, that's also, it's not good for you. When you ask for
yes.
feedback, like, help me to grow.
Yeah, that's a kind of that's a wrong kind of feedback. I think, like, yeah, I think, one of, like, the two sort of questions that I ask that I get asked often are, is my work cohesive? You know, because if it's cohesive, then it's ready to be seen. It's ready to be understood. It's my body of work cohesive, and then kind of start reaching out to galleries, and depending, I think the answer is yes
Hmm.
when it makes sense. And that's the other thing that's important for artists to understand. And I think an artist who um, it's a sign of maturity to understand that your work is not the just one piece. Your work is the body of work, and that needs to have an arc that is that you can describe with 2 to 3 words, kind of thing. And
Right.
my work is about
Hmm.
X,
Hmm.
you know, and it's not the one piece. Is the body of work? Is the
Right.
whole, you know, it's the whole work. I
Yeah.
guess.
I like to describe it as artists, we are writing a book with our work, and every painting is like one paragraph, uh,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
every chapter is a series.
yeah,
Every
yeah.
every sentence is like a sketchbook.
Don't show me a paragraph, because then it doesn't make
It doesn't make any
a lot
sense.
of
Story
sense.
doesn't make sense. Exactly. Right.
Like, show me the story. The story is the whole thing. And I think it's important that artists understand this and they have a cohesive body of work before they can approach a gallery. I mean, you're a gallery director.
Yeah.
Am I? Is
Eh,
this accurate?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like I said, it's one painting is just one. It's like one sentence said out loud.
yeah.
you need to
No,
s-
for
you
sure,
need to say more. Yeah, love it.
for
Well,
sure.
Pato, as we start wrapping up and landing this plane, I know you're going to be jurying for us, curating a show here at Electric Contemporary coming up. That's
I'm
called,
excited about that.
yeah, it's called Currents, the Language of Paper. That one is really close to me because I love paper. As you know, I'm a paper artist. Uh,
Yeah.
Although I'm not applying for it, 'cause, it's not ethical. I'll be just overseen as the gallery owner.
Yes.
But we invite our friends who work on paper to check it out. It's called Currents, the Language of Paper. The website to learn more about is the language of paper.artcall.org, and the deadline is August 1st. So I want to thank you, for doing this for us and working with us. It's going to be an amazing show. I cannot wait.
I appreciate that, and I can't wait to start seeing the submissions. I think it's important. It's important for artists to understand two things. If you're not selected, I think it's important that the artists understand that it's not that the work is bad. It could be two things. It just doesn't fit with the narrative of the show. Number one, or the work is not mature enough yet.
Mhm.
It's never ever that the art is not good enough.
Yeah. Or sometimes it just doesn't fit in the gallery. Like you
It's
have,
just it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit physically in the
yeah,
gallery. That's
it
it.
has happened.
It isn't about you. Uh,
Right.
but anyway,
No, and I found like when I jury an exhibition, so I'm in front of so many artists, I take so many like artists that maybe didn't make it in the show, but I write notes like, oh, I want to follow this artist, or I want to like know more about this artist. And then some of those artists, like eventually they make into the shows or things that
For
I'm
sure.
projects
For
that I'm doing
sure.
just because. But I'm thankful for that, opportunity to review their work, that now they're in my radar, and it's really cool.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, Pato, thank you so much. Where can our friends can find you on both Instagram, TikTok, and your website if they want to also follow your work?
Sure. My website is www.patopaez, PATOPAEZ.com. And my Instagram is @Pato Paez, PATOPAEZ. And then I think TikTok, oh hey Pato,
Okay.
oh hey Pato, and Pato Paez. Anyway, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Pato. Thank you so much. My friends, if you enjoyed this conversation, do me a big favor, reach out to Pato, reach out to me on social media. Let us know that you listen, that you like, or if you, also enjoyed it, please do us a big favor and share it with a friend. That's the best thing you can do today. Share this episode with a friend, and they will thank you for it. But wait, before you leave this video, if you are an artist who wants to grow your art career and wants to achieve greater success, make sure you check out the Art Next Level program. You will find a link under this video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the next video that we have recommended just for you.